All right, we're going to get started with this webinar this afternoon. My name is Ricky Telg. I'm the director for the UF Institute of Food and Agricultural Sciences Center for Public Issues Education in Agriculture and Natural Resources. And the webinar this afternoon is Residential Fertilizer Use in Florida, Insights from a Statewide Public Perception Survey. So there'll be an opportunity for you to, as participants, to put in your questions in the Q&A here in Zoom. So throughout the webinar this afternoon, feel free to put your questions there. We'll answer them as the different presenters and topics change from slide to slide. This afternoon, I'll be presenting in just a moment, as well as Karlibeth Leitheiser. She's the Extension Program Specialist here in the Center for Public Issues Education, or as we call it, the PI Center. But first, we're going to have a discussion from Dr. Bryan Unruh. Today's presentation really will focus over the overview that we did, not only in the PI Center about this survey of public perception related to fertilizer use and fertilizer ordinances, but also an overview of fertilizer as well. So you can see there at the bottom of your screen, we'll have a topic summary that Bryan will lead in just a moment. I'll present the study findings. Carly will talk about the tools and resources that have been developed to help to share the story and information related to fertilizer use and application and the ordinances, and then a dedicated time for question and answer throughout. So Bryan's first going to be talking about residential fertilizer use in Florida overall, and then some of the reasons why we actually conducted the survey back in 2024. So I'm going to stop sharing my slides, Bryan, and it'll be your time to do that as well. There you go.
Sure. Thank you, Dr. Telg. I do believe that you should be able to see my screen now. Is that accurate?
Yes, we can see it.
Well, great. And good afternoon. As Dr. Telg mentioned, talk a little bit about kind of the fertilizer use in Florida as it relates to the urban landscape and kind of why are we where we are today. And I think, one of the things as the old guy at the University of Florida that I'm often referred to as, I've been here a long time. Came on faculty at the University of Florida in January of 1996, and water issues have been a big deal ever since then, and there's news articles such as this, Florida tops the list for most polluted lakes in the US. And so then there's a lot of questions as to why are Florida lakes, rivers, coastal areas polluted, and what are the pollutants that are there. And so water quality challenges, really, this isn't anything new. It's been going on for many, many years. And in fact, the monitoring of water really dates back to about 1972 when the Federal Clean Water Act was passed, and it challenged all 50 states to really address some of these water quality challenges. And in particular, as it relates to the urban landscape, is this non-point source pollution. And it comes from, again, a lot of different sources. And kind of in theory, you really can't point to the actual pollutant that is originating. In other words, point source pollution, there's a factory with a pipe and impaired waters flowing out of this factory, and you can point to it and you can say, aha, there's the problem. Whereas non-point source pollution comes from really a lot of different sources, including land runoff or precipitation, atmospheric deposition, drainage, seepage. And so, and it could be anything from septic or fertilizers. And so these nutrients end up in the water and cause some problems. Well, part of that Clean Water Act resulted in this impaired waters listing process that each state adheres to. Florida seems to be, as a guy that works with, across all 50 states, Florida seems to be a bit ahead of a lot of other states, probably in part because we have a lot of water resources in the state of Florida. And so this impaired waters listing, the process that is done, basically challenges each state to go and monitor the water that is within the state, and then to work through a process of addressing those challenges that are there. Well, one of the actions that have been taken over the years in Florida are fertilizer ordinances, and this is a copy of the original ordinance that was way back in the year 2000, so nearly over 25 years ago, up in St. Johns County, as it related to fertilizer use in the urban landscape. And so again, this was in January of the year 2000. Today in the state of Florida, we have 130 some restrictive fertilizer ordinances. And so many that we only have 67 counties. So we have some ordinances that are township level or city. And so this creates kind of a challenging landscape in which to operate, to figure out exactly what fertilizer ordinance is in place and what are the nuances of each of these fertilizer ordinances. And so I partnered with the Center for Land Use Efficiency and we developed, I had a former graduate student, did a lot of work with the PI Center as well as my program. And we developed this fertilizer ordinance mobile website where applicators or consumers could stand anywhere with a GPS-enabled smart device and be able to figure out exactly what ordinance is in place where they stand. Well, I think to look forward, we kind of need to look back a little bit. And again, we go back in this timeline I've kind of assembled over the years as to when did these various things kind of happen. And so again, it started out in January of 2000 with the St. Johns County Ordinance, which then led to the green industry BMPs that our commercial industry, landscape industry follow. Golf course BMPs, sod production BMPs, all of these fertilizer related issues are kind of in there. A lot of research that came funded through this. But I want to draw particular attention to this July 2007 point on the timeline where Florida Department of Ag and Consumer Sciences Consumer Fertilizer Task Force was launched. And so that was a task force that was comprised of a number of different folks from the legislature, Florida League of Cities, Department of Environmental Protection, water management districts, University of Florida Institute of Food and Agricultural Sciences. And in this task force, this information is still available readily on the internet. This Consumer Fertilizer Task Force started looking at these issues in Florida and bringing them all together. And interestingly, if you look at the Florida statute, it was interesting because it said the legislature finds, and it's interesting. This must have been really important because it was actually inserted into the bill twice. There's a need for better training and education regarding the proper use of consumer fertilizers, and then it was a bit redundant because letter D, there is a need for education regarding the use of consumer fertilizers. So this kind of slipped through the process, but I think it's kind of interesting because it points to the fact that doubly we need to understand and create some education as it relates to fertilizer use in the state of Florida. Well, one of the participants in this task force presented some information that was not specific to Florida, but really specific to the U.S. and these 80 million homes with lawns, and kind of what did people do as it related to fertilizer use on their lawns. And roughly half of U.S. homeowners did nothing to their lawn. About 10% of U.S. homeowners would hire lawn care service to provide fertilization for their home lawn. And so this information was kind of at a national scale, but we lacked this information in the state of Florida, specific to the state of Florida. And so this has always kind of intrigued me as to, well, what do actual Floridians do? And we really didn't have a whole lot of information. And so one of the things as I've interacted with behavioral and social scientists that have always kind of intrigued me is program development and what pieces of information need to go into that to reach kind of the desired outcomes. And so when we think about this program development on the left side of this top model, social, economic, and environmental conditions. And so if our goal is to improve our environmental conditions in the state of Florida, well, what pieces of information need to be understood for us to build a program that results in these desired outcomes? And a key component of this program development is gaining some baseline understanding of the participants' knowledge, attitudes, skills, and aspirations, or this CASA, K-A-S-A. So again, knowledge, attitudes, skills, and aspirations. And if we don't know what that is, then we probably will never achieve some of the outcomes that we desire. And so over the years, 29, almost 30 years of working with IFAS in this realm, I think it was interesting that we lack some of this knowledge and attitudes as it relates to what are Floridians doing, what do they know, what do they not know, and what do they need to know as it relates to fertilizer use in the urban landscape. And not knowing that information, I think, has really resulted in kind of this kind of hodgepodge of education out there trying to get a message across. And so back in 2023, when the Florida legislature appropriated some funds to IFAS to really look at the effectiveness of fertilizer ordinances, I saw this as a great opportunity to partner with the Public Issues Education Group to really get in and try to understand what Floridians know, what they don't know, and what do they need to know. And so that is where kind of the genesis of this survey that was done to really get to this information. And so that's kind of a pretty high level and quick overview of where we've been over the last 25 years to set the stage as to why was this particular survey of Floridians done and why was it done now. And so with that, I'll end my slide and turn it back over.
All right, great. Thank you, Bryan. I think that you should be seeing the about slide there. So thank you for that overview of where we have been to where we are here in the state of Florida, as well as nationally as well. And so that does set the stage for why we're doing what we have been doing this past year in the PI Center. Again, this was a joint work with the PI Center as well. And Bryan mentioned the Center for Land Use Efficiency, or CLUE. So they funded this research and gave us direction about what they were looking for and why this was necessary. So here you see what this study was about. The researchers here at UF, we conducted a statewide survey of Floridians' behaviors and practices surrounding residential fertilizer application, not to be confused with producers or agriculturalists. This was specifically on residential fertilizer application, and to gauge their awareness of and adherence to residential fertilizer ordinances. And so what we're going to be doing over the next few minutes is to provide you with really just a brief overview of some of the major findings of the study. We do have a report that I'm happy to share with you as well. But of the kind of the major pieces here, the survey focused on homeowners associations, or HOA, their involvement in application of fertilizer, current landscape conditions, fertilizer practices, perceptions of both current and future implementation of fertilizer BMPs, or best management practices, and as I said already, awareness of and adherence to local fertilizer ordinances. And there's a lot more to the study. We can't do it all in an hour, but that kind of gives you an idea of what we looked at. The data was collected between March 7th and March 26th, 2024, so just a little over a year ago. Conducted within Florida. We had 1,173 total responses, but there were only 929 valid completed surveys used during the analysis. Some people didn't answer all the questions, for example. So a little over 900 completed surveys, and the participants were required to be a Florida resident, over the age of 18, and have a lawn that is fertilized. So who participated? Well, we had more females than males. 63% of the respondents were female. White, in terms of their ethnicity, was overwhelmingly 85%. And as you can see here, and this will come up in some of the responses as we talk about this later on, 60 to 79-year-old individuals made up about 60% of the respondents for the survey. So one of the major questions that were asked is, how do Floridians fertilize? And as you can see here, 47% fertilize their lawns themselves. So almost half of them fertilize their lawns themselves. 19% hired out a lawnscape professional to fertilize, and then 18% reported that their HOA manages the fertilizer application overall. Now, when do Floridians fertilize their lawns? We have you see the red arrows there, so that on the right-hand side where it says top months for residential fertilizer applications, that's when that's the months that we actually saw the responses. In this case, March, April, and September. But as you can see on the right side of that bar chart, a large number, 334, actually, about a third of the total respondents, said that they were unsure of their lawn's fertilizer application schedule. That's possibly due to outsourcing labor for landscape services, or just not understanding or knowing exactly which month that they were fertilizing their lawns. In terms of how much fertilizer, most of the individuals fell into these two categories about applying their lawns with fertilizer based on the fertilizer package directions, or for those who do not fertilize themselves, they relied on a landscape company to make those fertilizer amount decisions on their behalf. So by far, those two areas there indicated by the red arrows are the determining factors about the application of fertilizer on their lawns. This was an interesting question because we were asking, where are you buying your fertilizer from? And so as you can see there, home improvement stores such as Lowe's, Home Depot, those type of stores or outlets by far were the primary places where Floridians sourced their fertilizer from in the survey that we did. Now I'm going to ask Bryan in just a moment to kind of talk about this particularly, but we were also asked what types of fertilizer that you applied on your residential lawns. And as you can see there, weed and feed was the most popular choice of respondents, followed by dry granulated fertilizer. Now, Bryan has an EDIS publication that's for our extension fact sheets, and I'm going to let him talk a little bit about why this was an interesting point for him overall as well.
So, thank you, Dr. Telg. One of the interesting pieces to all this is that for many years, the University of Florida faculty, turfgrass scientists, we have kind of shifted, and our recommendations are to not use weed and feed products. And there's a couple reasons for that. And the largest of that is especially in kind of North and Central Florida, the weed component within weed and feed and then the fertilizer component are applied simultaneously. But oftentimes the weed product needs to go out earlier than the fertilizer or the feeding of the lawn. And so that's kind of the one side of that. And so we've kind of tried to uncouple those two products from a recommendation standpoint. Then there's kind of another side to that in that when you think about like broadleaf weeds, and so the dollar weed and some of those more problematic weeds, they generally don't cover the entire lawn. And so from our perspective, why would we treat an entire lawn when the weed itself is only localized to a particular area? And so this was an interesting find that the most people are using weed and feed products, and those are the one products that we, in our extension publications, suggest not to use.
Thank you for that explanation. Again, if you have any questions along the way, please feel free to put your questions in the Q&A in the bottom of your Zoom screen there, and we'll be able to answer those along the way as well. Now, Bryan also mentioned earlier on about soil testing, and so we did ask the participants if they'd had their soil tested in the last 12 months. And as you can see there, almost 2/3 had not had their soil tested in the last year, and then less than 12% of respondents apply fertilizers based on soil test results. So roughly 1 in 10 are making that application choice based on soil test results. But when asked to disclose their future intention, 34% indicated they intend to test their soil to determine what amount of nutrients should be applied in the future. We asked them about their motivations to fertilize. And so the two that are highlighted there in that green box, I feel a personal obligation to read the fertilizer label before application, and I feel a personal obligation to carefully apply fertilizer according to plants' needs, were by far the most popular motivations for people to fertilize. We also asked them their future intention about fertilizer application. And as you can see here in this graphic, we use the prompt, in the future, I will. And the numbers there at the very bottom, as you can see there and read the graphic, I will read the fertilizer label to make sure I apply the right amount of fertilizer, almost 70%. I will prevent the misapplication of fertilizer on paved surfaces, which is also one of those runoff situations that was mentioned earlier, about 67%. I will water in fertilizer just after its application, a little under 2/3, and then just over half said that I will select slow release fertilizer products in the future. Now, Bryan also mentioned about fertilizer ordinances. So a major component of this study was to identify what people knew about or aware of fertilizer ordinances, what they didn't know about fertilizer ordinances in their area. So that first pie chart that you see there on the left-hand side, we asked them about their awareness of residential fertilizer ordinances. And so you can see there between the unsure, which is 61%, and no, I'm not aware of fertilizer residential ordinances, roughly 3/4 of individuals were either unsure or weren't aware at all of their residential fertilizer ordinances if they had one there in their county or their municipality. On the right-hand side of that screen, for those who answered no or unsure, we asked the follow-up question of them to see if they would support a future fertilizer ordinance adoption, if they were unsure or said no. And as you see there, it was almost evenly split between unsure, like I'm unsure whether I would support that, or yes, I would support that, and then no, I would not support a future fertilizer ordinance adoption, would be 16%.
Dr. Tug, let me jump in back on
Sure,
that, if you don't mind.
absolutely.
One of the questions, the question that came from the Florida legislature, it was, are fertilizer ordinances effective or not? Do they work? And then as we kind of dug into that, for them to work, it would kind of imply that they have to be done, right? And then when we have 3/4 of our residents in the state of Florida telling us they're not even aware of these things, then I think that obviously is going to have an influence on that key question that the legislature asked, are ordinances working? And so this was, I think, particularly insightful from this survey.
Great. No, that's a great insight there, Bryan. I appreciate that. Yes. And again, for those who even said that they were unsure or they didn't know or aware of one, the answers, again, saying yes, 41%, that also means that almost 60% were unsure or would say no to future fertilizer ordinance adoptions. We did ask those who said yes, I am aware of fertilizer ordinances in my area. Some, again, follow-up questions there about why. So following fertilizer ordinances, and that's kind of the prompt there, helps the environment, the community awareness, and adherence to fertilizer ordinances will help the environment. So that idea of community, why it's important, has a positive impact. Again, all of these are over 75%. I'm familiar with my local fertilizer ordinance, 77%, and I adhere to my local fertilizer ordinance. So again, 76% of those who said yes actually adhere to it. So even if you're aware of it, and you say yes to it, roughly, half of, I'm sorry, 3/4 said they actually adhere to the actual fertilizer local ordinance. We asked them about to what extent do you trust these information sources because, as Bryan alluded to just a moment ago, will be important to educate, to inform individuals about fertilizer application and ordinances. We also wanted to find out who they trusted in that, or what did they trust in that area. The most trusted source of information about landscape and fertilizer topics, as you can see there in the green box, were first universities that research fertilizer use. Landscape professionals were seen as second, and then water management districts came in as third as most trusted sources of information. The least trusted sources of information, and the least of all of those, was social media, followed by news media as the next least trusted, and then the federal government as well. So as we look at potential sources to communicate and educate the public, homeowners, landscape professionals about fertilizer application in residential areas and ordinances, it'll be important to really to highlight those individual, both the individuals and entities that are seen as most trusted. We also asked them about their interaction with their local cooperative extension office. As you can see there, overwhelmingly, they had not actually interacted with extension in their areas. We then asked them, if you had the following types of learning opportunities to learn more about landscape and fertilizer topics, which would you likely take advantage of? And again, please understand that the majority of the respondents here were in the 60 to 79-year range. So that also impacts how we can view these particular responses. When you see watching a video online, reading printed fact sheets, and then again watching a television program such as those that would be on HGTV or Home and Garden TV network or RFD TV and that type of thing as well. So overall findings were, there's two slides here about kind of the overall findings. Nearly half of all respondents do fertilize their lawns themselves, with a remaining split fairly evenly between hired help and homeowners associations who manage their landscapes. Most respondents did not test their soil and do not base their fertilizer application amount and frequency based on soil test results. Respondents determined how much and how often they applied fertilizer by reading the fertilizer package, which is a good thing, and also from recommendations from landscape professionals. And the last one on this slide, that respondents typically fertilize their lawns in March, April, and September. As we brought out specifically, the most common type of fertilizer applied to the home lawns were weed and feed type of fertilizers. That most of their motivation for fertilizing were by the fertilizer package directions and a personal obligation, which I think is very important, to meet the lawn needs rather than motivations about doing something that would be impactful to their peers, their families, their friends. And I think one of the most interesting findings, and I think key to what we're talking about here, is over half of the respondents were unaware if their property existed within a residential fertilizer ordinance area. And then there are even more than that who weren't even aware of fertilizer ordinances in their area. And those who were unaware or knew that they were not under this ordinance area, they were evenly undecided on whether to support the adoption of future fertilizer ordinances in their area as well. So some of the recommendations, and again, the report goes into many, many more recommendations, but specifically for our extension faculty in research and practice as well, that I know that we do have extension programming in this area, but to really develop even more, develop and deliver fertilizer education programs, especially in counties and municipalities that have existing residential fertilizer ordinances. There is a disconnect, as we are kind of finding out, is that even with those within those areas that do have ordinances already in place, that people are aware or don't even know that they are there, the ordinances. And that these extension programs emphasizing the soil test, the need for soil tests and how that's done, and the impact that a good soil test can have on the fertilizer application and the amount and frequency in yards overall. So one of the things that we did in this as part of this project is because of this lack of awareness and understanding surrounding the fertilizer ordinances and practices, we developed what we are calling a toolkit. In just a moment, I'll have Karlibeth Leitheiser to provide some of the information and the tools that we have developed here. Because as that last bullet point there says, our subject matter experts, policymakers, and community leaders really have an opportunity here to use the findings that we had in this study to better inform the public on fertilizer policy and the recommendations. And we would hope that they would use the toolkits that you will see in just a second as parts of these educational and outreach materials to better inform the public about fertilizer applications. So Carly, I'm going to turn it over to you to kind of explain what we have here, and then we'll open it up for questions people may have about any of the topics that we've talked about today.
Thank you, Dr. Telg. So as he mentioned, this is kind of the outreach portion of this project. So we talked about the research and the findings, and now here's our application of what we've done with it. As you'll see on the screen, we developed 3 issue guides, which is just a fancy word we use for one-page infographics that go over key findings. And we have 3 of those that focus on fertilizer application in homeowners associations, just in general, Floridians residential fertilizer use, and then a specific one on fertilizer ordinances. And all of these fact sheets are available for free to download on our website. You can scan that QR code, or when you receive a follow-up email from this webinar, you'll receive the link there as well. Also within this toolkit, we have generic social media posts that can be used to cross-post on different platforms. It's mainly targeted towards educational university systems, but it also could be applicable to nonprofits and other social media work there. And then we also have PowerPoint slides similar to this presentation, just educating on the major findings of the study and the so what's, mainly geared towards extension educators and other public educators. And then finally, you can access the complete final report with more findings that were not listed here today, all on that same page on the toolkit. I did want to mention we have ongoing projects that will add on to this toolkit over time. They're still in development, but we will have social media videos and more. So if you want to access that, just scan that QR code, or you can receive it via the follow-up email.
Great. Thank you, Carly. With that, we do have some time for question and answer. So if you do have questions that you would like for us to respond to, please feel free to put that in the Q&A. It should be at the bottom of your Zoom screen. We have a question and a comment. I'll take the question, and I think that I'll let Bryan take the comment there too, especially related to blackout periods. But the question that Blake provided is, did the study collect information on the respondents' location so you can determine if their reported behaviors are in compliance with their local ordinances? Yes, we did. We had by both by county and by zip code. So we could look at that. We have not looked at that specifically right as of yet. We wanted to provide this more over aggregate information to be able to show overall statewide results. But we could dig down into finding out if what they are knowing about or not being aware of, for example, related to fertilizer ordinances or application match up with their specific location overall. So it's a good question. So yes, that's one of the areas that we may be looking at in the near future. Brooke mentioned, interesting that most respondents were unsure or did not know about their local fertilizer ordinances, but the majority were fertilizing outside of the midsummer months, which are typical fertilizer blackout periods in many ordinances. So Bryan, you want to kind of take that one there?
Sure, I think, Brooke, that's a good observation. And I'm not sure, one of the times when we do these types of surveys, there's a lot of the what questions are asked, but getting to the why sometimes is a bit more challenging. I think there's some ties here, potentially some ties. If you look, a lot of the large box stores, the home improvement stores, were where many people were purchasing their products. Well, if you think about national marketing campaigns and stuff that are associated with those large retail providers, they're kind of a one size fits all. A lot of times these marketing strategies in spring and fall are typically when a lot of national marketing is pushed into that. Think spring fever and people are out there fertilizing, which ironically, especially for North and Central Florida, um, we have some pretty strong suggestions not to be fertilizing too early in the spring, for environmental reasons as well as just good turf grass management. So I think that is interesting, why, that people are kind of naturally adhering to this. Maybe it's just because it's too dang hot to get out and fertilize in the middle of the summer. I'm not sure we know that.
Yeah, good, very good. Another question we had is, did the survey consider respondents' distance to waterways? If so, were those closer to a river, lake, or estuary significantly more likely to be aware of local fertilizer rules and comply? Also, did the survey ask if respondents recreate, fish, and or consume local seafood from local waterways? If so, where were they more likely to comply? Jim, no, we did not look at that specifically in this survey. We didn't ask about their consumption of local seafood either. But again, going back to the question earlier, we do have zip code information. We could look at the proximity of specific respondents to waterways. But again, we were looking again more of the aggregate information here, which was their knowledge of fertilizer application, their behaviors of fertilizer application, as well as their knowledge of and awareness of fertilizer ordinances. But this, again, something that we could look at and see based on the geography of the rivers, lakes, and estuaries, if there's any type of synergy that we can see there between those who responded and their geographic location. Good question. Next one was, given that the final total of viable responses was 929 and that the respondents were skewed by gender and age classes, how comfortable are you that the responses are widely representative? I mean, I'm sure you are. I hope so. And I can understand, but were there efforts made to compare the composition to other or previous surveys? So I do believe that the response, what we have here, I'm comfortable with. Even though what we find in home residential purchases are skew older anyway. So that is the population that we were looking at are homeowners or those who are fertilize their lawns or have some type of HOA or professional do that for them. So yes, I feel comfortable in that regard because most homes are going to be purchased and owned by those who are maybe a little bit older than the 18 to 24 to the 30 years of age. So that I'm not overly uncomfortable with. In terms of skewing, in terms of women over more so were the respondents here in this webinar, in this survey. Again, I feel very comfortable with that too, because even though they may not be the ones who are absolutely doing the fertilizer application on their yards, many women are also the ones who are making these home decisions as well. So again, I do feel very comfortable with this actual results and what we received from the respondents overall. On another tag, can you recommend any studies that have monitored or assessed the environmental response after the imposition of the ordinance? Says, I monitor water quality in an adjacent urban lake, and I see some trend indicators in the data that suggest there has been a reduction in N and P in our lake, but I'm looking for other studies for comparison. Thank you. This is a very helpful webinar.
I can speak to that. There are, and they're cited. We need to, and I was going to do a quick search to pull up. So the report that the team provided back to the Florida legislature really highlights a number of different studies. There's the Krimsky et al. Study that was kind of in the Indian River Lagoon region of Florida looking at ordinances. There is a huge study that was where they went in and looked at lake watch data over decades and comparing where these fertilizer ordinances were implemented. In particular, no ordinance, a winter ordinance, a summer ordinance, or just generalized restrictions that speak to those. And I'll attempt to pull up that report and paste into this as well. But there have been several published reports looking at the effectiveness of ordinances.
Okay, great. Thank you. Are there any other questions people have? Please feel free to type them into the Q&A. Okay. Brian's putting one into the Q&A, which is great. Looks like. So Brian has put in there. I'm not sure if people can see that.
I just popped that into the chat as well. That should.
Okay. All right.
I think the chat may only be viewable.
Only goes
Yeah,
to us.
yeah, the chat's
But,
only with us.
I can include any links or supporting links in the follow-up email to webinar participants.
Yeah,
That would be
so
great.
we'll get that too, because I think that only went to the person who asked the question. So we will again follow up with everyone here with any of the links that, for example, the one that Brian just had, so that you're not missing anything overall too. So with that, I think we're almost to the end of our content for the webinar. Are there any pieces, questions, or comments that Brian or Carly you'd like to make with the study or fertilizer ordinances or application that we may not hit upon in this webinar already?
I think one of the things, and Karlibeth referenced the fact that there's still some things that are being done with this survey, and there's additional analysis being conducted on the data to help us kind of refine some of that. And so, kind of speaking back to the age demographic, it's interesting when you look at trusted sources and then the desired information, how they get it. And so one of the least trusted or the least trusted was social media, but yet one of the most requested was social media, YouTube videos on how-tos. And so trying to parse that out and to determine, is there a difference, do the younger people prefer information one way and the not so younger people prefer it in another. And so those are kinds of things to help us continue to get a better handle on this.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, we want to thank everyone for participating today. There's one more comment, I think. Let me see. Oh, thank you. Thanks, Brooke. The QR code that you see on the bottom right-hand side of your screen, there's a brief feedback survey. So please feel free to do that. We would love to get your feedback on the webinar and any other topics that that the evaluation component also has as well. You can also use this link as well, this QR code, and you can also follow us in different areas of social media in terms of Facebook and others there on the bottom left-hand side. So with that, I think that'll be the time for today. Please feel free to go to the toolkit site. We would love for you to be able to access and apply and use the toolkit components that we've developed as a result of this survey. The report is also available. And you've also provided us with some good questions that we will be able to look into, dig a little bit deeper in to provide even more detailed information to help educate and inform residents here in the state of Florida about fertilizer applications and about ordinance overall. With that, again, thank you very much for your time today and have a great day.